you give us a little bit of a timeline of all the events that led up to how this bill actually happened to be passed, and also the different groups that were involved, the groups that were for it, the groups that were against it? Uh,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this happened in literally record time. Lawmaking needs to be a far more thoughtful, evidence-based process, but it was just in a matter of maybe 3 or 4 weeks that Council Member Kshama Sawant, announced her proposal to add caste to all the ordinances under, Seattle city law. And this was going to add caste as a protected category to the city's non-discrimination policies. Before I get into, who was supporting, who was not, let's just take a step back to talk about what are non-discrimination policies. So, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the federal version of non-discrimination law. And what it sought to do was to end the entire act has a variety of titles. Each one of these titles tries to address discrimination in different arenas. So Title VII speaks to non-discrimination or protecting against discrimination in the workplace. So discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, religion, and gender these are all protected classes, so that when you're in the workplace, in decisions that are related to hiring, firing, or even having kind of a workplace that is conducive to your ability to work in an environment that has psychological safety and physical safety, you must be treated with dignity, with mutual respect, and these hiring decisions or firing decisions, or even the environment in which you're working in, cannot be made hostile on the basis of these protected classes. So that's what non-discrimination policies do, is that they ensure that the workplace is safe for everyone, regardless of their background on these bases. Now, the power of these policies is that these classes are broad. They don't presuppose a particular perpetrator and a particular victim. What I mean by that is that there's not a presumption that only men can discriminate when it comes to sex discrimination, or that only Caucasian whites will discriminate against people of color. Race or gender are categories that are neutral, so that arguably a man working in, say, an all-female office, where if the female coworkers are harassing him, making comments about his looks, or holding opportunities from him because he's male, or making disparaging remarks, to a point that it rises to the level of a sustained hostile environment, well, that man has protection under Title VII. Similarly, these categories are also broad enough to have evolved as the growing diversity of the United States has changed, so that it can also accommodate intra-community tensions. So a category like race, if there is, say, discrimination between someone, maybe, someone who is Latino or something, and there's some sort of tension between light skin and dark skin within that community, well, that is protected, even though it's not necessarily laid out specifically. That's the beauty of these kind of broad categories. And so caste has now been added to these categories, but the key difference between caste and all of these other categories is that caste is very specific. Whether you look at the language of the proposal, whether you listen to all the testimony of the champions of this policy, everything singled out and targeted South Asians. So you're essentially having to violate the very non-discrimination policies that you're trying to amend, because now you're discriminating against a group of people on the basis of their national origin or their ethnicity in order to justify this amendment. Now, who was behind these bills? There's a number of, they self-define as Ambedkarite groups. There's a group called Equality Labs. Those have been the champions of these types of policies, and they have yet to address the legal questions around this. They are, presenting a view of this, of widespread discrimination, and the fact is that the evidence doesn't bear that claim that they make. In fact, the only reliable evidence that's out there is a survey by Carnegie Endowment for Peace that shows us that actually caste-based discrimination is exceedingly rare. The second thing we have to remember is that we're talking about 1.5% of the entire population. So we are a micro minority by every definition of the word. And the fact is that existing policies can protect against caste-based discrimination. Caste-based discrimination is wrong. The Hindu tradition tells us that every individual is inherently divine and merits and puts an obligation on us to treat everyone with dignity and mutual respect. And so, this idea the framing that somehow those who oppose the policies are doing so because either they're denying the existence of discrimination or they're justifying it is simply not true. So rather than testing existing policies, they've gone ahead to push a policy that specifically targets South Asians. And the fact is that this is actually going to harm all South Asians, regardless of their caste background. These activists believe that their target of these are going to be so-called upper castes, which, that's a whole different conversation in and of itself in terms of what that means in an American context. But this policy is going to harm all South Asians, bottom line, regardless of whether they are, scheduled caste backgrounds from India or not. It's also going to harm future generations of Indian Americans. I myself was born and raised in this country. My kids are now 2 generations out. And so once something becomes a law, it's there to affect people for generations.
So thank you for giving a background on how everything behind this actual bill. And from what you said, it does seem like the laws that exist they should be broad enough to protect if there is any caste discrimination. And the problem basically is that it's never been tested. So if there was some case of caste discrimination, they didn't test this law. They just sort of went ahead to sort of pass this law.
Exactly.
That's okay.
Exactly. So it's in the absence of any sort of credible evidence of caste-based discrimination being a widespread problem in the United States, I would say that one case of caste-based discrimination is one too many. Yeah. However, they haven't even tested the existing laws. So even when you're not look beyond the city of Seattle to some of the colleges that have also added caste to their non-discrimination policies, administrators have admitted that they have never received a complaint. And then there are some of the champions of these policies who say, well, we've heard of students or tech workers who have faced discrimination, but they haven't filed their complaint because caste was not listed specifically. Mm-hmm. That's either a failing of their HR departments to not take in any sort of complaints, or I'd have to question the very basis of whether there was something that rose to the level of harassment or discrimination that has kept them from filing the complaint. Because some of the examples that we've heard do not rise to the level of the types of discrimination that we know can occur in the workplace.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.